Good evening, everybody. My name is David Benham. I am the Vice President of Engineering of Hovair Automotive, which is part of the Rhino Toolhouse Group. Today, I'm going to speak to you about turntables, especially air-bearing turntables. But before that, let me just get through a couple of things. Obviously, the Rhino Toolhouse and Hovair have a shared mission statement, and really it comes down into three things: innovation, customer partnership, and exemplary customer service. So what does Hovair do? Most of you already know, but basically we build the equipment for bulk handling material in order to get it to the line. Once it's at the line, we present it to the operator, we present it to the robot, and this can be carts, turntables, tilt tables, lift tables, all the stuff which I think most of you are familiar with. So this brings, I know it sounds obvious, but why do we use an air-bearing turn? Why do we use a turntable, an air-bearing turntable, and should the turntable be round or square? But before we get into that, let me share an interesting story with you, and it's a question that I get asked a lot, and that says, why did you come to America? Well, like most things, this is, I think, and I hope you do too, is quite an interesting story. So it started in 1982, and those of you who know your geography, on the left is a map of the Falkland Islands. And the Falkland Islands is situated 300 miles off the coast of Argentina, which is 8,000 miles from the United Kingdom. Well, in 1982, General Galtieri decided that the Malvinas, as he called them, needed to be back under Argentinian rule. So he invaded the Falkland Islands. There's a British colony there, and he basically took everybody prisoners of war. Margaret Thatcher was in charge, and she was not too happy about the whole thing. So she decided that she was going to do something about it. She put together a task force, 27 naval ships, 35,000 men, and set off halfway across the world to go and take the islands back to be in British rule. Now, what's this got to do with air-bearing turntables? Well, after the war was over, which lasted 74 days, if you look at the map on your left, there's one thing missing, and that is somewhere to bring ocean-going cargo ships so you can unload cargo. So when the British took it back, the only way they could get cargo ashore was to drive a boat into the close by and pick the containers up with helicopters. So there's an English engineer came up with a system called LCAS, which is basically they built a pier in 36 hours after they've invaded somewhere, and then because the pier is long and thin, and the first thing you want is trucks, guess what? The pier is not wide enough to turn a truck around. So hence the name, they needed a turntable. So again, what's this got to do with the United Kingdom? Well, the American Navy thought it was such a good idea that they would buy the LCAS system and they would buy a turntable. And they bought the turntable from Hovair, United Kingdom. But because it was the US Navy, that it had to be built in America with American steel, on American soil. So Hovair got the contract for the turntable. That we had a operation in Seattle called Hovair Systems. So we built the turntable in Seattle, and it was a huge success. And here we are some 30 years later. I'm actually still here. So now let's get back to the topic at hand, which is turntables. So why a turntable? Well, the real reason for a turntable is pretty simple. It is the fastest method of exchanging an empty container for a full container, because when one is moving, the other is moving. And this is very common in automotive. We have literally done, I'm going to say thousands, because it's at least that many and more. So they come in all shapes and sizes. And one of the other questions we get asked a lot is, why round, why square? Well, this is really very simple too, because if you've got a bin of parts, and you need to ergonomically move them up, and you can walk up to the front of the bin, you have a square turntable. Now, if you've got something on a turntable that's very tall, and basically it has to go round, because then the operator is working on the same level as a turntable. So on the right, you can see a pair of turntables in the Volvo truck plant, and they are in a platform, so they're obviously round. And the turntable on the left is a two-position square turntable, which happens to have tilts on it. So again, why air bearings? Well, an air bearing is basically a cushion of air that the platen or the steel part that sits on the top floats on. And one of the reasons they are so popular in automotive is that when the air is turned off, this air bearing sits down in a pocket, and it doesn't matter how hard they drop the rack, which can be 4,000 pounds, on this turntable, they can't really hurt it. So you can see on the right, this is a picture of an air bearing itself. It basically is a rubber diaphragm stapled to an aluminum backing plate with holes. So this is what the air pressure comes in, it escapes around the perimeter, and that is what gives you your air film. So the president of Hovair years ago came up with the term Starbase because he said it looked like a star, and there are very different styles. On the left is a 5 air bearing one, because it's a small table. On the right is a 6 air bearing, and this happens to be for 180-inch diameter turntable. And the one in the middle has 8 bearings, which will actually carry a 50,000-pound load. So for those of you who haven't seen an air bearing turntable operation, what we've got here is Scotty in the workshop. This turntable platen is floating on the air bearing, and he just gave it a push, and it is floating on its own. Now we take that, this is the same turntable, obviously the person is not going to push it around. So here we have a drive, which is the yellow box on the left, and this wheel engages with the perimeter of the turntable, and it rotates the dunnage and swaps the empty one from the full one. As you can see, this is a round turntable, so it would be encased in a platform. So this is a 2-position turntable. So here we see a 4-position turntable, and now we actually call this a side by end, which has got 4 racks go on here, and the operator will be working out of this one, and then the empty one will go to here, and it will go to here, and it will be changed, and the fork truck driver can either change 2 at a time or 1 at a time. And the reason for a 4-position turntable as against a 2-position turntable is the fork truck driver only comes around half as often, which makes his time more efficient. So there we have a 4-position turntable, and here's the control stand. Now here, this is in a Woodhaven stamping plant, and they put 24 of these turntables in, and they are 2-position, and they have a tilt on either side. And the tilt is there as an ergonomic device to allow the operator to reach the parts from the back. These are hot stamped parts that have come into this now. And this particular setup was unusual because it's used for many different parts, and sometimes they unload from the long side, and sometimes they unload from the short side. So Randy then pressed the green button, which will rotate the turntable 180 degrees. And then he will come down and press this little black button down here, and then it will now stop on the short side. So now it stops on the long side. Now it stopped on the short side. He pressed the button again, and it stops on the short side. So this is just a variation on the theme, and this was a huge success. So now we come to another innovation that we had for a turntable, and this is when they have a body side rack where the operator has to walk into the rack. Well, the issue with the turntable and a walk-in rack is that when the rack is on this side, it needs to be flush so the operator can walk into the rack But the problem with that is when it's on the aisle side and the fork truck is unloading it, it has to be up in the air so the forks can go into the rack to take it away. So this is in the Ford Cuautlan plant in Mexico where they built the Ford Fiesta, and these are body sides. Now you can see here that this rack here is in the pocket because the operator is walking in and out. And on this side, these are new body sides, and they're waiting for the fork truck to come and pick it up. So here you can see how fast this one goes around. It actually rotates in 6 seconds. So as you can see there, this rack with new body sides is up in the air, and this one is down in the pocket. So here's another picture of the this particular installation. Had 4 turntables. It had 2 3-position turntables and 2 2-position turntables, and that was because of the access around the side for the 3-position turntables. So people often ask, the air bearing seems to be a little bit flimsy, but in actual fact, because the air bearing is facing up and runs on the underside of the platen, it cannot or very rarely gets damaged. This is a great example of these 4 turntables were installed in 2002, and in 2017 they are still been running. And it's the way that Ford Chicago do the end of all their press lines. So obviously, for those of you who know the stamping industry, they are very unforgiving when things don't work. So speaking of longevity, I thought the nerds amongst us might be interested in this next thing I found in the archives. So I apologize for the graininess, of the picture, but this is actually AutoCAD version 1.18. It's on a 6 megahertz PC, IBM AT, with a 20 megabyte hard drive. And yes, that is right in the name Hovair. And yes, that is me, 1986. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you guys know a little bit more about turntables. And whoops, sorry, operator error. Any questions, you can contact me, John, or Randy, or anyone else at Hovair. I thank you for listening.